Welcome to the Fitness Simplified podcast. I'm Brooke Davis, women's functional nutritionist and fitness specialist with Elysian Women's Wellness, and I'm here to simplify your fitness. Today's topic is something that I know pretty much everybody needs to hear, so I am excited to talk about it. I had $1 for every time I've heard someone say, I know what to do, I'm just not doing it. I could probably retire right now. Should be great. It doesn't work that way. And maybe this sounds familiar to you. Maybe you've said that before. And maybe even now, right, you feel like you've got the perfect plan on paper. It's all good, but you just can't seem to follow through with it. And this is where most people stop, right? Just blaming themselves for not having enough discipline, willpower, or enough time, right, to follow the plan. That might also sound familiar. But the reality of it is that it's not usually about the plan. And most often, even the best laid plans won't work if your mindset is not aligned with it, because it's not always or even usually about what you're doing. It's about how you're doing it and why you're struggling to do it to begin with. So today's episode is all about that deeper layer of navigating change and why your nervous system, your past experiences might actually be leading you to self-sabotage and to not be successful, how trauma and stress responses can actually block habit change, and then some of the mindset shifts that you may need that are truly going to move the needle in your health and fitness journey. And then, of course, we have to talk about how all of the changes in perimenopause impact your mindset and what also needs to shift along with your approach in order to be successful during that time. So this episode is really honest, it's deep, and it's really, really needed. If this resonates with you, please share it with a friend who's maybe even in that same place. Leave a review or tag me on social media. I would love to hear what part really landed the most for you. So let's dive in. I want to start by just talking about why your mindset actually matters so much more than people realize when it comes to creating lasting change, right? You can do something for 21 days and get some results, but then not stick with it and maybe not even keep your results. So why is that? And I know that it's really tempting to focus on finding the perfect plan, right? How many things have you tried? The best workouts, right? The best macros, the right supplements. And while obviously, yes, these things do matter, none of that sticks if the foundation behind it isn't solid. And that foundation is here. It's your brain. It is your beliefs. It's your identity. It's how you see yourself. So let's look at this from a brain-based perspective for a minute. So your brain is designed for efficiency. It's designed for safety. It loves habits because they conserve energy and they're familiar or they're safe. Okay, you know the outcome, even if it isn't serving you. And the more you repeat something, whether that is just grabbing a, snack when you're stressed, skipping your workout when you're tired, or even down to the way that you talk to yourself when you get dressed in the morning, okay? The more automatic that becomes. By age 30, I think it's something like 90% of our life is automatic. It is just happens to us without us even thinking about it. So when you're trying to make a change in these habits, you're not just fighting laziness or lack of motivation. You're literally trying to reprogram your neural pathways that your brain has deemed safe, familiar, and efficient. And this is why that mindset work is so, so important. It helps you create that internal safety message and the intention you need in order to actually overwrite, or override old wiring and those neural pathways. And here is the other part of it, is that your habits are actually a reflection of who you believe that you are. So if you're constantly being inconsistent, and then you're thinking, I'm inconsistent, or worse, even, saying, I'm inconsistent, I always fall off my plan, right? or things like, I've never been athletic, your brain will then look for ways to prove that belief is true, and not because you're broken, because that's what brains do. They look for the confirmation. So even if you have the world's best plan handed to you, which we do, it won't matter if your self-image still sees you as someone who can't stick to anything. And this is why just knowing what to do isn't enough. Behavior change actually starts with identity change. And this is why you'll hear me talk so often about starting small, right? Creating very attainable goals, celebrating reaching those goals, every single one of those wins as you go along, even if it seems super simple or if it seems silly, right? Because ultimately, you showing up, even in those small steps, as the version you want to become, version of yourself that you want to become, before you maybe even believe that you are that person, is how you create that change. So a really good quote that I think sums it up that I've heard before is, you can't outperform your self-image. And I see this play out all the time, right? In myself, in clients, and maybe that's something you've seen in yourself. So ultimately, the real work isn't just about doing more, right? You don't need a longer to-do list. You don't need any more supplements. It's about becoming more aligned with the version of yourself that you want to be, not just physically, but mentally. And when you can start to see yourself differently as someone who follows through because you've set goals and you've crushed them that were, again, maybe easily attainable in that moment, but your consistency with them, right, changes who you are and how you see yourself. And, changing the part of you who honors her body because you're taking the steps to take care of it. And in that, you're now making those choices from a place of care and wanting to nourish it instead of punish it because you think it's not good enough, right? Everything else from there just becomes easier. It's not effortless. Of course, there is effort involved, but the more aligned you are, the easier these changes are going to become. And the more aligned you are, like I said, mentally and in your brain and these rewirings, the easier all of this change happens. So, how do we do that? Next, we're going to talk about a really powerful framework that helps explain how we view ourselves and our progress, and that is the growth versus fixed mindset. So this concept actually comes from a psychologist, Carol Dweck, and it's really often used in education or business, but it actually has huge implications in health and wellness. So a fixed mindset is basically when you believe that your abilities, your traits, or outcomes for certain things are set in stone. So thinking things like, I'm just not somebody who sticks with things, or again, I'm inconsistent. I've never been good at exercise. This is just how my body is now, or this is how my parents were. And so now it's genetic. It's basically that you don't. And if something doesn't come easily, it's maybe not meant for you. A growth mindset, on the other hand, basically you see literally everything as a skill or a trait that can be developed. You can say things like, I'm not consistent yet, but I can learn how to be. This workout was hard, but it's helping me grow stronger. And, this setback or this falling off track is actually a learning opportunity that I can take to adjust things going forward. And so those are some examples. And one of the biggest mindset traps that I see women falling into, especially during these busy seasons, transitional seasons, holidays, things like that, is thinking that if they can't do it perfectly, it's not worth doing at all. Say the all or nothing, that perfectionist mindset, that is fixed mindset thinking. And it creates this constant start, stop cycle that completely degrades your self-trust over time. When you feel like you can't stick to it during, certain times of the year, it creates a cycle of, oh, the holidays are coming, better get my bigger jeans out and things like that, right? It sets you up for this self-fulfilling prophecy, essentially. But when you shift into this growth mindset, everything becomes more flexible. It becomes more sustainable. So looking at some examples, right, of of maybe even going into these seasons. I always gain 10 pounds over Christmas, would be a fixed mindset example. Growth mindset would be, well, often in the past, I have gained 10 pounds over the holidays. But this year, I'm doing this, this, and this in order to maintain my routine, maintain my health, and to avoid that from happening again. Another example of some fixed mindset. I am just someone who emotionally eats. I can't help it, right? Growth mindset. Emotional eating is a pattern that I have used to cope in the past, and now I'm learning new tools that support my overall health better. See the difference, right? This growth mindset actually allows space for growth, for learning, evolving from mistakes, and allows you to maybe even enjoy the process instead of constantly feeling like you are failing at actions that maybe have recurred repeatedly in the past. So, one really specific type of fixed mindset is called limiting beliefs, and it kind of goes back to patterns, but these are subtle, often subtle, but really powerful thoughts that feel or people act like are facts. They're actually just stories that we've kind of absorbed over time, and they really matter because, as you may or may not know, your thoughts shape your emotions, right? Which shape your behaviors, which shape your identity, which shape your results. So ultimately, your thoughts shape your reality. That is absolute fact. It's basically been proven. And so, looking at a few examples, again, I always fall off track, maybe during holidays or just period, right? I can't stick to anything. My body is broken. It's not working. It's selfish to focus on myself. Okay. This is a big one that I hear and one that I'm really excited to talk about. And these beliefs are sometimes so ingrained that we don't even question them, right? They are just facts. We say them and move on from them. There's nothing we can do about it. Okay. We live our lives around them, but they didn't come out of nowhere. A lot of times they're learned, right? They come from either past experiences, like maybe you've tried diet after diet, and most of which, let's be real, are absolute garbage to begin with. But say you haven't been able to stick with them, right? Or you haven't seen lasting change. And so your brain goes to the conclusion, it's me. This is just how I am, right? I can't stick to anything. I'm meant to be this way, whatever. A lot of times we'll get them from family or people who are close to us. So maybe you've watched your mom or aunt constantly criticizing their diets, constantly criticizing their bodies. Maybe you were only given attention or praise, right, when you were losing weight or you were doing something that was attributed to losing weight. We get them way too much from society, right? We have this constant bombardment of messaging from movies, magazines, commercials that basically says you need to shrink yourself, you have to sacrifice yourself to look a certain way, right? You can't eat yummy foods, all these things in order to be valuable to others. And that's a huge one, right? Being worthy. And the problem is that these beliefs, like I said before, they actually create these self-fulfilling prophecies. So if you say or believe that you always fall off track, guess what's going to happen when you hit a busy week or you feel low energy, especially when you don't have a plan for it, right? When you're not taking these, again, I'm going to put mistakes, but you're not taking them as learning opportunities and applying something different the next time. You're subconsciously looking for proof that the belief is true, and then your brain is trying to protect you by protecting what's familiar. So repeating that pattern, right? Even if it's painful, even if it's not serving you. So how do we actually start to shift these inner narratives? So there's a 4-step kind of belief framework that we use with clients. And so number one is to name the belief, this limiting belief. Write it down, call it out, make it really visible. So for example, I always fall off track. Okay, then you ask, and number two is you ask, where did I get that? Who taught me that? Did this come from a coach, a parent, right? My own past lessons or potential perceived failures? Is it a societal message? Looking at where this came from helps you to realize that it may not even be your belief to begin with, right? Maybe it didn't come from you or even your own experiences, but somebody else projecting onto you. And then number 3 is asking, is this 100% true? This is coming back to like the all or nothing. I always fall off track when blah, 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 right? Is this always true? Or are there times where you did actually stick with something, even if it looked different than perfection? And these are some of the funniest reels on Instagram. And if you are on social media at all, I'm sure you've seen them. But when, somebody spills a little drop of their coffee and then they just like dump it down their shirt. Okay. Um, you're not doing that. So if somebody does have, a perfectionist mindset with their diet, or something of that regard, or exercise, things like that. There are many other instances where you don't have that thought process. So it's not true 100% of the time. It's true maybe in regards to this, but that doesn't mean that that can't change. So that's addressing limiting beliefs specifically. But let's get back to this fixed versus growth mindset concept. So, a few simple ways to start just really building that growth mindset into your overall, wellness journey, but also life, if there are other areas that you find this coming in. And number 1 is adding the word yet to your language, right? Instead of I'm not good at meal prep or I'm terrible at this, try I'm not good at meal prep yet. Okay, this is giving you the opportunity, not just in your brain, but also, expressing to others that you're working on something. It's giving you this chance to develop a skill or habit that takes time without shutting down the things that you're already doing well, right? And then number 2 is reframing. I'm going to put failures in quotes, but as feedback, right? They're not failures, they're lessons. It's information that you can use to regroup and switch gears. So if you didn't follow through on your plan this week, right? Instead of spiraling into guilt and shame, right? Ask yourself, what got in the way? What would make this easier next time? And why did I do that? Why do I think this happened? Or why did I make these choices even? Coming back to those patterns, those habits, those limiting beliefs. And this is when failure, it becomes information, it becomes education and data points versus definitions of your worth or final, again, failure and ending points where you give up and go back to every habit, right? And give up on every habit that you've been working on. And then focusing on progress, not perfection. That is a bit of a tagline around here because, progress doesn't always necessarily show up where you think it should or where you want it to, like the scale, for example, or even, the whatever extremes you are working toward. This might actually look like just going for a walk when maybe you would have skipped movement altogether. Okay, no, you didn't get a workout in, but you did do something that betters your health and maybe even your mental health in the process. And then catching negative self talk, right? Again, just the awareness of it. If you're like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. And then taking the steps to reframe it. So that is progress, right? Simply the awareness is a huge, huge step in creating change. And then eating one nutrient dense, high protein meal, maybe after days of not seeing a vegetable. And again, no, that's not ideal, but jumping on it right when you notice it and when you realize that, oh yeah, it's been a few days, like I need to do this, making your next meal that nourishing one instead of waiting until Monday, getting back to that all or nothing. And the reality of it is that these micro wins that seem really small, they're actually huge steps because when you celebrate this process, you are going to stay consistent long enough to see the ultimate transformation, whether that is a physical or whether that is a lasting change in these thought processes, in this awareness, and in these habits. So if you have been stuck in this mindset of, I just can't stick with it, ask yourself, what if I am simply trying to use a fixed approach, right, in a season that maybe needs some more flexibility? And maybe what if this version of me needs just a little more curiosity and a little less criticism? This is where true change really begins, not in doing everything perfectly, not in checking all the boxes, but in simply seeing yourself as someone who can learn, who can adapt, who can grow into the habits that you are wanting to build and continuing to actively work toward it in some way. This next part that I want to talk about is something that really gets overlooked in health and fitness spaces, specifically weight loss, habit change, right? And it really impacts your tendency to be in a fixed mindset. And that is the impact of chronic stress and past trauma. This is huge. And this is something where I forget the exact statistic, but a very large percentage of people who are overweight and obese have major past trauma. And it's something that, coaches, people on the internet who make comments about food choices and things like that are completely disregarding, which is unfortunate. But the reality of it is that it's not often that people are just lazy or they just lack discipline or motivation, right? Or they just don't want it bad enough. It's that their nervous system doesn't actually feel safe making this change for, again, various reasons. Back to your brain is actually wired to keep you alive and safe, not to help you thrive. This is the hard part, right? So if you're someone who has been through or is going through prolonged chronic stress, right? Burnout, rejection, loss, or trauma, big T or little t, even if it was years ago, your body can actually see these attempt at new habits, changes, right, or goals as a threat to your safety. And when that happens, they show up as what we call stress responses. These come from nervous system survival mode. They are often labeled as laziness, inconsistency. We see it come out as self-sabotage. But these are, again, just trauma responses. There are 4 main trauma responses: freeze, flight, fight, and fawn. So going into these, so freeze looks like feeling overwhelmed to the point of not being able to do anything. You want to start, maybe you know what to do, right? But you just can't seem to actually take action. And your brain is trying to keep you safe by shutting you down in order to avoid that perceived danger or failure. And that perceived danger could be failure based on past experiences. Okay, I'm gonna put failure in quotes. Flight, this could look like constantly jumping from plan to plan, always looking for that next quick fix or perfect strategy. It's basically a form of avoidance. So you're running from the discomfort of sticking with something long enough to potentially see results. Fight is where this internal criticism, this self-talk really comes in. You might push yourself really hard when you're on, but you have really negative body image, again, self-talk. You might feel like you need control over everything, that perfectionist mindset, okay, being really critical of yourself. And a lot of times this can actually look like discipline in a lot of different ways when it comes to maybe, business or scheduling or things like that. But it's actually rooted in fear and that perfectionist mindset. And then fawn is one that I see so often with women. And it's a little bit sneakier, but this comes out as people pleasing, right? Overfunctioning, constantly putting others' needs before your own, saying yes to everyone else, not leaving time for your own energy, your own health, because your body has learned that pleasing others and putting energy outside of yourself is actually the safest way to stay connected or accepted. The powerful shift here is really understanding that self-sabotage in any of these ways is just self-protection. Right. And a lot of people are like, I self-sabotage all the time. And this comes, again, this vicious cycle of self-loathing and mistrust of yourself, when really, if you took a little bit more time to understand kind of the why behind these behaviors, maybe you'd have a little more compassion for that. You're not broken, you're adaptive, which is so, so powerful in a ton of ways, but we need to learn how to make it work for us, not against us. And healing starts with creating that sense of safety in your body again, not just adding more pressure, more rigid plans, right? More criticism. So, what does that actually look like? I'm glad you asked. Here are a few tools to just begin regulating your nervous system kind of on a day to day basis and really creating more supportive foundation for that long lasting change. One that I talk about all the time and use all the time is breath work. So, even just 2 to 3 minutes of slow, deep breathing can take you out of that fight or flight and into that rest and digest. So box breathing, inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. Most importantly, when you're trying to downregulate, you want your exhale to be longer than the inhale. So the count doesn't matter. Counting can actually also help you get into that state, but that is one very simple concept. Number 2, gentle movement, just walking, right? In nature is going to be best. There's so many studies that, in Japan they use forest bathing. It can decrease pain sensitivity. It puts you into that parasympathetic much faster than just, walking on a treadmill, things like that. But ideally, we want movement that isn't tied to calorie burn or muscle building or like any kind of real intent behind it other than chilling out. So things like dancing, yoga, tai chi are going to help release more tension, reconnect you to your body in a non-threatening way. Journaling is one that can be so powerful. Processing your thoughts on paper, especially diving into what you're struggling with questions like what feels unsafe about this change, right? What am I afraid will happen if I'm successful? Some of these questions can really bring some unconscious beliefs and thought patterns to the surface. And then something we preach all the time in our coaching practice, implement with clients, is creating safety through small, consistent steps. Start with something that feels super manageable, like 9 out of 10 confidence rate that you will achieve this. And maybe it's just drinking water first thing when you wake up, right? Taking a walk after lunch. These little wins can actually help you rebuild that self-trust and reduce the overwhelm of trying to overhaul your entire life all at once. And then, of course, I have to mention this, having outside support from a coach or therapist, right? And or therapist. And, we do address the nervous system mindset like this in our coaching. But if we recognize that the client maybe has deeper patterns of trauma or chronic stress, we do refer them out, and getting more support from a therapist or someone specializing in it can be life-changing for people. When we stop trying to force change and instead learn to listen to what our bodies are saying, when your body feels safe, that consistent action becomes less of a battle and really just a more natural progression of how you take care of yourself, which is really cool. So if you've been feeling stuck, maybe it's not necessarily about trying harder. It's just about learning how to feel safe enough to maybe try differently. Now, I want to zoom in on season of life where these mindset shifts, this awareness, and then some additional concepts become even more important. And that is something we talk about all the time, perimenopause. So, perimenopause is one of those seasons of life where it really does require a deeper level of self awareness, of mindset work than most women know or expect. These changes don't just bring, physical symptoms, but there are emotional shifts, there's identity questioning. When it comes to some of these shifts, there is major disruption in how we relate to our bodies. And so many women come to this point feeling like they've maybe finally figured out what worked for them, whether that is, certain training, how they eat, their routine that used to bring them consistent results and get the changes they wanted, but suddenly their body stops responding, right? They are tired all the time. The weight gain comes on overnight. Stress levels are through the roof. And what used to work actually maybe even leaves them more depleted than it used to. Not only doesn't work, but now they're tanked, because of it. And the worst part is that most women's natural inclination is to just double down on everything, right? Work out harder, eat less food, push through that fatigue, because that's what we've been taught, that more discipline is the answer. But as maybe you found out, perimenopause doesn't respond to force well. And this is where simply trying to control the body can actually lead to more resistance and more dysfunction. What's mostly required now is a really big mindset shift from control to, again, support and collaboration. So instead of asking, how do I get my body to do what I want, right? How do I lose this weight? The better question becomes like, what is my body actually needing from me right now? What is my body telling me through these symptoms? And so we need more curiosity, again, learning from what you're seeing. We want observation and then being able to adapt and support the body in the way that it needs, not in the way that we want. So one really common thing that I hear is my body's failing me. And I know it's really easy to slip into that story when energy is low, progress feels slow, maybe non-existent, your clothes aren't fitting great. But that story is not only really disempowering, but it's not true either, right? Your body isn't failing. It's actually not only doing exactly what it's designed to do, but it's evolving, which is so fascinating. Okay. Hormonal shifts in this time they're not a sign of it breaking down, right? They are a natural part of the transition from, right, reproduction to the next point. And this is a new season. And the more you fight it, the more actually disconnected you become from your body and the harder all of this is going to be. So, one of the most powerful shifts that you can make during this time is, like I said, learning to see and interpret symptoms as information and data points of what's actually happening, what your body needs, rather than failure from either your process or your body. Okay, weight gain, fatigue, low libido, poor sleep, they're not punishments, they're messages. And when you stop judging it in that way and just start listening to it, you're gonna start to see that shift of working against your body to working with it. And some of this might mean that you feel like a beginner again in how you train. You may need to change that up completely. How you eat, there may need to be some major shifts. And then, most importantly, how you recover. This is huge, okay? You may need to actually unlearn everything you thought you knew about getting results, because I can promise you that it's different now. You don't have to prove your worth through how hard you can push, because your body simply doesn't have the resilience for it anymore. So, if you're in perimenopause, you're feeling like your body is unpredictable, unrecognizable, let this be a reminder: you are not broken. You're not behind. You simply need some new tools and a new way of thinking to support the new woman that you are becoming. Because you're not starting over, you're just starting different. So to finish off, I want to give you some simple but really powerful tools to help you work through some of these thought patterns. You don't need them all, maybe pick one or two and find what feels best. But one is daily affirmations, Bible verses, right? Um, Things that you can stick on your mirror, write in your journal, speak them aloud throughout your morning, finding ones that really land in the season that you're in, and then reframe practice. So we touched on this, but learning to pause, pivot in real time. So thinking, when I notice myself thinking blank, I will choose to blank. So when I find myself thinking I'm failing because I'm tired again, my framing to, this exhaustion is data, right? I need to learn to listen to it. How can I support my body? And then the 2-minute morning check-in before the to-do list, before everything gets started, right? Take 2 minutes. How do I feel today? What do I need today? Okay. It is amazing how powerful this can be to just give yourself something, right? Maybe you need more protein. Maybe you need less caffeine. Maybe you need a 10-minute walk instead of a workout. Check in and adjust. We also have some journal prompts that can take you pretty deep. So I will tag that resource in the show notes. So as you move through this season, whether it is perimenopause, personal transition, just a hard week, come back to some of these tools. Okay. I hope this was really insightful for women in all phases of life, because once you've identified the beliefs, the patterns, the nervous system responses that could be holding you back, the next step is really simple, right? It's not always easy, but it is simple. You start to practice these new patterns. Mindset work isn't just about the awareness, it's about the repetition, it's about the time. It's about choosing a new way of thinking, a new action, one small moment at a time, until those thoughts and actions become your new habit. and they feel completely natural. Just like training, consistency is everything. These tools are not meant to overhaul your life in a day. They're meant to create space, some clarity, some compassion, maybe, if that's what you needed, as you navigate true lasting change in a real body and a very normal brain. If you feel like you need more structure, more support in this season, please reach out. I will link the application to a free consult. See what kind of resources, whatever you need that might be a good fit for you. No pressure, no sales. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Fitness Simplified podcast. We are stoked to have you join us on your journey to better health and fitness. If you have any questions, suggestions for future topics, or you just want to chat, feel free to reach out to us on Instagram at Brooke_Elysian and Facebook linked in the show notes, or via our website, ElysianWomen'sWellness.com. If you enjoyed what you heard today, we'd be thrilled if you could take a half second to leave us a 5-star review. Not only will you be helping others find our show, but you'll also be entered into our monthly $100 giveaway for new reviews. If there was something you heard that was helpful or impactful, please screenshot, tag me, and share it on social media so we can bring you more. Plus, you will be entered into our monthly Legion Recharge post-workout giveaway. New episodes drop every other Monday, so make sure to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more. Thanks for listening.